we'll wait until everyone's here to get officially going.
Got him.
There he is.
Sweet.
All right, we're ready.
Okay. Give me just a second. Okay, we're going to start by just sort of revisiting this PowerPoint from last time. I think it's important that we have this open communication and we can see where each other's at. And I think we did an excellent job to kind of elaborate where we are and our positions and why we give the proposals that we do. So we act as salaried workers with specialized degrees. I mean, GAs come in and they are not, fresh out of high school. These are professionals who have undergraduate degrees. Many of them have master's degrees as well, especially if they're going for their doctorate. They are experts in their field by any remark, and they are doing jobs and teaching courses that the average person could not do, and they have the specialized knowledge to do that. When it comes to our job itself, obviously we tied workload to this, I think very clearly. Obviously you guys didn't have Article 7 for us today. We're hoping for that without too much future delay in the coming weeks. But there's two things that are very tied heavily for us, and that's not something that's going to change as we discuss these articles differently. So while we're discussing Article 10 primarily today, I just want to reiterate that Article 7 and workload is still significant and important to us, and we're going to take that in consideration with all the steps that we take. One of our biggest considerations here was, can we afford to be graduate assistants at the University of Florida? And over the previous years, the answer has become increasingly no for many GAs. I sent these graphs last time. Obviously, there's four of them. There's a lot going on here, but you can look at the bottom two graphs. You can see our stipend versus the minimum wages in Florida has been decreasing. Our buying power is equivalent to someone on minimum wage. And our stipend as a percentage of the cost of living in Gainesville. Now, we've never hit that mark of the cost of living. Obviously, the cost of living is always increasing, but our salary has not been increasing to mark with it. A lot of times we put our stipend up against inflation over time, and we've had this argument and difference in philosophical debates, however you want to phrase it, on who's responsible for paying us after inflation. And the fact of the matter is we have to buy after inflation is passed. We have to buy rent, we have to buy food, and the cost of living obviously tied to inflation, but not directly with inflation. As Florida has grown more populous over the previous years, the cost of living has increased here more than almost anywhere else in the nation. And we see that in Gainesville specifically, and we can see that our stipend versus the cost of living has been decreasing significantly, making it harder for GAs to be able to eat and to pay rent and to be adults that we are. Now I went over this last time as well, and the question is, can the University of Florida afford raises? And the answer was yes last time. It's still yes this week. I haven't been giving anything to say that it is not true. And in fact, when we look at a lot of these kind of values, we look at the University of Florida having a credit rating increase because of how solid their net position is. We look over the last several years and we see, skyrocketing of their net assets, of their net position. And we see a huge merit raise pool just because of how much extra money we had from the overhead going towards faculty and staff. We see $10,000 bonuses going to tenured faculty. A lot of these things, we read them, we see them in the news, and then we come here and we bargain, and we're not seeing that same sort of demeanor coming from the other side here. We're seeing instead the treatment where we are being treated secondly to all of these groups of people, which, I'm not saying these tenured faculty do not deserve bonuses. I'm not saying that faculty and staff do not deserve this merit raise pool. They are exceptional workers and they do deserve to be paid for the work that they do. But our job here is to discuss GAs, and we're not getting paid what we know we deserve. And when we see news, especially when it comes to the former President Sass and his, over $1 million a year, you know, uh, like it's something that we can't kind of not talk about. And I brought these up last time, but I want to, I want to have a conversation here. I want to have a discussion. These are the numbers we're looking at when we are trying to figure out how to bargain and how to, approach making sure GAs are paid what they deserve. And I mean, Patrick, I just want to give you an opportunity here to discuss any of these things, and maybe there's a different way you're looking at these numbers that we're not. But I mean, I don't want to gloss over these numbers and say that they don't matter, because they do matter to us, and they matter, and we want to have a discussion on why a former president can be paid $1 million a year severance and GAs can't be paid that. In fact, when it comes to merit raises, if we have 4,000 GAs and if we have 3,000 continuing a year and we're getting like a $500 merit raise, how many Ben Sasses is that? It's probably less than one of his total severances. And so we look at that numbers, we look at that math, and that's not a number we're going to be agreeing on anytime soon, when we look at things like that. And so, I don't want to just talk at you. I want to have this conversation. So, I would love to have a conversation with you kind of about these topics.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the slide is the same, and I think some of my responses are going to be the same. I mean, I don't really see anything on this slide that is a subject of bargaining with GAU. Like you said, you're here to talk about GAU. This is all context that informs your proposals, and I appreciate that. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the former president's salary with you. I appreciate that it informs your position, but I'm not going to sit here and defend the way that we choose to pay administrators, current or former. Like I said, I appreciate that it informs your position and how you assemble your proposals. But I'm not going to specifically go down this list and talk about these things individually. We're not going to do that.
Yeah, look,
Can you speak to the title? Can you speak to the title of the slide?
Yeah, absolutely, Jacob. I don't think we have not made a budget-based affordability argument. To Austin's point, Austin said, I haven't seen anything that says you can't. I don't think you've heard me say that in any of our sessions.
I guess
so it's a question of well.
And Patrick, let me just maybe I can rephrase this sort of how we're going through this. Now, obviously, these give us background knowledge into where the University of Florida is at. And I guess for us, the question is, what separates GAU from these other groups? Obviously, these all go through their own sort of systems to end up at the numbers that they're at. We're not arguing that you guys have the University of Florida follows through the exact same system for everyone here. But it's hard for us to digest the vast difference between how we perceive GAU is treated when it comes to getting these salaries and raises versus news coming out of the University of Florida. So, I mean, is there a significant difference that's drawing back GAU from being able to receive, 10,000 bonuses like we're giving to tenured faculty? What is stopping GAs from being able to receive some of the money that's helping raise the credit rating of the University of Florida?
I mean, I want to make sure I'm understanding. Austin, are you asserting that a career tenured professor who is finishing in the exceeds expectations, that there is some equivalency with an employee who has yet to actually complete their terminal degree? I mean, is that really the question you're asking?
When it comes to being able to afford food and a living wage, I would say there is an exceptional comparison, because I mean, are we doing the same level of bringing in funding to the university? No, we are not. And I can state very clearly for you, there are differences between our two groups. Are tenured faculty doing exceptional core to the mission of the University of Florida? Yes. Are graduate assistants core to the ability of the University of Florida to function, to do research, to teach? Yes. We are just as core to those components. And so we should be treated as a core component. Instead, we're being treated kind of as a side piece that, has to fight for every kind of nickel and dime here when we're fighting to be able to afford rent. And tenured faculty, I mean, they do an exceptional job, I'm sure. And I'm sure that the ones who pass their, and get an exceptional score are doing great things. But that shouldn't stop GAs who are doing great things from being able to also receive funding to be able to afford rent and be able to get closer to that cost of living.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just think it's an extremely false equivalency to try to even, I mean, I'm not exactly even sure how that very small group of career tenured high performing faculty is quite frankly relevant to the conversation. I mean, I appreciate that it does represent, dollars that the university has access to. I appreciate that. I'm not saying that's not the case, but I'm left wondering what the equivalency of that would be in the GA bargaining unit.
The equivalency is how GAs are viewed by the University of Florida in terms of core component of the mission, or are we something that, is not core and central to the mission of the University of Florida?
I don't view the $10,000 bonus as a core component of our compensation plan either. I mean, that is something that is brand new and certainly on the edges of something that's even just emerging as something that we're doing. So, I mean, I don't think those two things necessarily have a whole lot to do with one another. I mean, I appreciate that it informs your position. I don't find the choice to pay long-standing, exceptional, tenured faculty that is terribly relevant, quite frankly.
I think you're getting a little bit lost in the weeds about what we're trying to say. What we want to say and what you have said is that University of Florida has the means to provide graduate assistants with a living wage. And what you've said, right, Patrick, is that yes, you guys have not said anything about us, UF, being unable to afford it. We are able to afford it. And it's a matter of just not being interested in having GAs be able to afford living in Gainesville or, in the surroundings of where they work. That is basically what we're trying to say. UF has the money. UF has the ability to do this, to make sure that graduate assistants can manage to live where they work, that they can meet the requirements of their J1 visa or their F1 visas. You just are not interested because you do not value the core work that graduate assistants offer to the university.
I mean, I could tell you, I fundamentally disagree with the statement. I believe the university is interested in paying a fair stipend to our graduate assistants. We want to pay a relevant, meaningful, appropriate stipend. We have brought you proposals that we believe are fair and appropriate based on all the factors. And we will continue to work with you and bring proposals that we believe are appropriate and fair.
What do you base your decisions on? If it's not cost of living, if it's not based on what UF can and cannot afford, if it's not based on some standard that is imposed on a good number of your workers that they have to meet, what is the basis of your proposals? Like I don't think we've ever heard the real basis.
I think we've been very explicit about that. I just think that we have a fundamental difference of opinion. I mean, I think, again, the thing that we're not going to be able to get over, and I think Austin did a good job of explaining this is going to be in circles. There appears to be, and again, I do not want to put words in your mouth, there appears to be the mentality among GAU that there is a component of the schooling, of the educational relationship, that the GAU appears to be presenting an equivalency that is employment. And it was even on the slide back or two previous slides back. we do not view that component of our relationship as being an employment relationship. We just do not, and that's not going to change. So, you know, we are not going to pay a stipend predicated upon the work that is exclusively part of your educational relationship with the university. So when you want to draw, and again, I know we have a fundamental difference of opinion on this, and I'm acknowledging that we do not agree. To say that there is an equivalency between somebody who is by contract prevented from working more than 20 hours a week, 9 months a year, and that irrespective of that, we then should draw an equal sign to whatever you all identify through your research, which I appreciate is meaningful and deliberate, and you take it seriously, to say that that is the bare minimum of whatever an annual cost of living in Gainesville is. We are not going to agree with you that that is the appropriate way to calculate it. We're just not. And I appreciate the fact that you feel strongly, and I appreciate the fact that you've laid it out multiple times. That is not going to be something that we are going to agree with.
I think we should continue moving on here, Patrick. But I think this has been, you know, a good discussion. I think it's been enlightening for us. I think, you know, at the end of the day, GAU and GAs do exceptional work for the university. We are core to the ability of the university to function on a day-to-day basis. And, you know, the university is bringing graduate assistants from across the country and across the world here to get an education, yes, but also to work. And that's why we're here, is for our working component. And when our work, which for many of us is a federal maximum on how much we're allowed to work, does not allow us to live in the community that we have to live to continue to do this work, then, you know, that's not a system that we appreciate continuing. We appreciate a system in which GAs are paid a fair amount for their labor, and the university can continue to function and be as successful as it has been over the last previous years. We want to see the university thrive, but as core components of the university, you know, as people who have been core to helping the amount of assets and the net position of the university rise over the past several years, we want to, you know, be rewarded for also being a part of that mission and doing that hard work. GAs are part of the reason the University of Florida can be so successful. They're a core component, just as faculty and staff are, and we deserve to be paid for that process, for helping the University of Florida thrive. And I understand it is it's a complicated relationship. This is not, you know, a relationship like many other employers where we don't have that duality, where we do have that duality in this case. And that's why we've tied workload to this so significantly, is because until we have a definition of how to separate how much we work and how much we do for education, the line is blurry in the sand, and we don't want it to be blurry anymore. We want to have that strict definition so GAs can say, this is how much I'm working, this is how much I'm doing for education, and this is how much I'm paid for doing my work. I can see those, you know, those clear values. And, you know, until we get to a point where we can have those clear values, that's we're going to continue to have this animated discussion and difference of opinions, I think. And I'm going to move on to our proposal here, Patrick, but if you have anything else you want to say on those points, I'm happy to hear it as I'm switching over here.
No, I appreciate it, Austin. Go ahead and move on to the proposal if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Give me just 1 second. Okay, you should be able to see it here. And there are a couple of changes that we're going to highlight here. Obviously, you guys gave us a couple of different proposals, and we appreciate, you know, the kind of discussion around those sort of options and where we can be at. Obviously, we're still very far apart on, I think, something both teams can be happy with. And so, you know, when we look at this, you're going to see that we haven't changed a whole lot on a couple of points. So the first point is this this standalone ratification. Obviously, we've changed the wording to make it very clear it's a standalone ratification. Before, the wording, I admit, was kind of nebulous, and it allowed for it to be implemented without any sort of ratification. And we've kept it as a sort of a standalone ratification this time. And, I heard you earlier, and you said you guys, were not interested in that sort of behavior. Last time we met, it was more of a hesitancy. And I would love to have a discussion on why it's gone from a hesitancy to a clear no, as you indicated from your perspective here.
Sure. I mean, I'll say it's as simple as some of even what you all recommended, which is you have been saying for literally months when you weren't willing to talk about any of the other articles. I want to paraphrase kind of what Sikander had said all those times. Look, we're not interested in talking about anything else until we know what you guys are going to do on stipends and insurance. Well, now we're talking about that. And now it seems like it wasn't really about salaries and insurance, because if it was, and that's what we're talking about, we would actually be getting feedback on all the other articles. But now it seems like not only is it relevant, it's the only thing. And that's kind of how I feel. Like there is no obligation on our part to settle this by itself. And I understand that's your interest. I mean, I'll just we're not interested in doing that. I don't know how else I can explain it. We want to button up everything else first. I appreciate you're absolutely welcome to propose it. You're welcome to modify it and propose it as you will. But the bottom line is I can just tell you emphatically, we are not interested in doing stipends by themselves and then kicking the can down the road on all the other articles. Especially when, even by your own admission, you view 10 tied so closely to 7.
We do. And I mean, this is not something we're not going to agree to a TA on 10 without discussing 7 regardless and getting close to that component. And I don't disagree on that. I think I disagree on your mischaracterization of our process over the summer. Our process was not, we were unwilling to discuss anything else, is we were, the GAU was unhappy with the delay after delay on getting feedback on what we view as 2 core articles. So core, in fact, that we are interested in having Article 10 be standalone ratification because it is core to our mission and core to what we need to give GAs. So not having feedback on that for, close to a year in terms of insurance, that is not something that we viewed as something we could continue letting happen without feedback. And so, we worked on other articles in the background. We made sure we were prepared for when we were doing counter proposals, but we did not appreciate the University of Florida continuing to wait on those articles as we were discussing everything else. The other articles are important. They're core. We discussed earlier how important Article 4 is to everything else. But Article 10 is one where it has reverberations throughout the other articles. It's core to who we are. It's core to what GAs deserve. And it is something that we're going to prioritize. And depending on the discussion we have with Article 10, and yes, the connections with 7, that's going to affect how we approach the other articles. So our discussion on not working or, not discussing the other articles is because Article 10 precedes those. So there's nothing stopping us from ratifying Article 10 in our viewpoint. And then following through and saying, that's how Article 10 went. Let's have a discussion on how that ramifies everything else. And that's where we're at. So moving on to 10.1, I want to characterize again, our proposal last time and a proposal this time, and what we saw and didn't see from your 3 proposals here. And I want to start with the effective October 1st, 2024. Now, this is not something that we, discussed lightly. In our proposal 2 times ago, it was January 1st. And you guys argued for October 1st, and we gave that to the University of Florida without having to haggle over certain days and dates. That's not something that we did lightly. And that's something that, in effect, saves the University of Florida 10 months of paying these higher stipends. which with our previous proposal saves the University of Florida upwards of $50 million. And in return for giving that to the University of Florida, for having that discussion, for saying we are willing to concede on 10 months of back pay and higher stipends, we were given 3 proposals that, had in our view, very little movement on the minimum stipend, which is something that's core to us. And so, we're not going to make much movement on that minimum stipend until we know that we're not, saying we can do October 1st and, selling 10 months of back pay without a discussion on, what that means to the University of Florida. So my question for you here is our discussion between January 1st to October 4th, 2024, did that influence your decision at all and how much you guys budged on the stipends? Because we didn't see it, to be frank.
So our position on that, Austin, is the fact that that was something that we handled in the previous round of negotiations. That consideration was given from as far as I'm concerned. You all reverted this in your initial proposal to January 1 from the previous reopener. So, just because you want to bring it up every time we bargain, which I appreciate is an important position, and it was an important concession that you all had made. From our perspective, that was a concession that was settled in the previous reopener. So the fact that it went from October 1 in the previous reopener, you all changed it back to January 1 to make it appear as if it was a repeated concession. We don't interpret it that way.
And I disagree with your characterization of this. Obviously, this is a different type of proposal. This is a full book bargaining versus a yearly proposal. When we were doing our yearly, we started in January and we finished around that time. And we said October, it's not ideal, but we'll settle for that for this year. But when it comes to full book, we're agreeing here to an effective raise 10 months after our contract was supposed to begin. This is not a yearly negotiation where we are, bargaining and it's going and it's flowing whenever we finish it. This was, supposed to be in effect 10 months ago. And instead of, us doing our due diligence for both of our teams and getting this done 10 months ago, we are still bargaining, and we could probably bargain past October 1st. We're definitely going to. And so I think it's a huge mischaracterization to say that this was decided in the last football, in the last kind of bargaining. Yes, we did agree on October 1st for that one, but that was a different interpretation. That was a different scenario. And we're viewing this as a full book negotiation, and this is October 1st, 2024. It's a different year. It's a different full book. And, if we were having it our way, our default is, raises to minimum stipend should go into effect when the contract was supposed to go into effect, January 1st. That is the default. That's what should have been in place. If we had done our due diligence and gotten this done a year ago, it would have been January 1st. We wouldn't have said, oh, let's wait a year to do stipends. It's because we were delayed, partially because we had to wait 6 months for a rebuttal from the University of Florida on that. And it made it so we did not bargain other things because this is so core to our components. So I disagree wholeheartly with your characterization that this was decided in the last round of bargaining. That's just not how GAU views it, and that's just frankly not how it is.
I guess that's fine. I guess my question is then why didn't you bring, if that's the case, and I appreciate the approach that you just kind of laid out, why did you not start then with all of the language from the previous full book? Because you can't pick and choose. If what you're saying is, no, we're going back to the full book language, then why would that not apply to every provision? It's more of a rhetorical question, to be perfectly honest. I'm just saying, like, either the reopener matters or the reopener doesn't matter, because we didn't come to you and use the previous minimum and start a proposal from there. We started from what the previously agreed upon minimum was. So, I think it's a little confusing to say, well, these things that were victories from one side's perspective, we're going to keep those, but the things that were concessions, we're going to sort of take those back out. I appreciate that we disagree on this, but either we're bargaining from the previous reopener position or we're bargaining from the previous full book. It can't be both.
I think no, I think we're on two different discussions here, Patrick, and I think the GAU's position is that when we are bargaining full book, we obviously start with the last thing we agreed on and we ratified. That's not something up for discussion. But when it comes to full book, if we had gotten it done in time, raises should have been in effect January 1st when our contract was supposed to go into effect. Obviously, we've had a rollover contract for the last 9.5 months, right? And so while our last reopener led to us deciding that raises to the minimum stipend would go into effect in October because that made sense when we finished the reopener, it is a large difference to equate that to when we are doing full book, and full book effects should go into effect January 1st, 2024. And we know they're not because we're delayed, to say, well, even though they were supposed to go into effect on January 1st, we're going to delay stipends by 10 months just because we haven't been effective at bargaining. It's not fair to anyone on that side of that stance to say, hey, you lose 10 months of raises because we weren't quick enough. If we agree to that equivalency, then there's nothing from stopping your team from purposely delaying us to say that, oh, well, then we can pay them later and later. And I'm not saying your team is doing that or is trying to do that. I'm saying that is an argument that could be made, that is then an effective tactic. And we're not agreeing that that's an effective tactic. We think that full book bargaining and the full book contract was supposed to go into effect in January. And that is our default when we started full book bargaining. Jacob, do you have anything to add to that point there?
Yes, just that the discussion at the time completely revolved around the idea that it made sense in terms of our bargaining at that moment. There was no discussion around this being a perpetual concession where from now on, one part of our contract will come into effect 9-10 months into the contract. It was never presented in that way. It was presented as something that made sense based on the circumstances that year. And honestly, there was mutual understanding of that. I think it's disingenuous to misrepresent it as this everyone knows that this is a perpetual concession now because it happened once during a reopener.
So all I can say to that, Jacob, is the fact that there is only one version of the provision at any given moment. And that's why I asked, are we starting this bargaining from the previous full book, or are we starting from the previous reopener? It can't be a mix. It can't be, well, we want these components from the full book and these components from the reopener. And I appreciate taking the position that, no, we like the previous language from full book. All I'm saying is, if that's what we're doing, then there's other things in here that should also revert. That's all I'm saying. You can't say, well, this provision reverts, but these provisions do not. That was what was ratified. You guys ratified it. We ratified it. That was the ratified agreement. That's the only version of the provision between us that exists now.
Patrick, I think we are once again having different discussions. We are not talking about the verbatim language. We agree what the language was in Article 10 at the last ratification, and we are not disagreeing that said October 1st. We are stating that was the result of negotiations during a reopener. And we believe that for full book negotiations, the default start is that raises should go into effect when the new contract was supposed to go into effect. Now, the language in the text said October 1st. We are not disagreeing on that. It said October 1st. But it does not say that we conceded that for full book bargaining, all of our raises should go into effect October 1st of that year. In the text in CCL, it was not October 1st, 2024. Right. Changing the date, we are discussing that date, and we are stating that our date, our default where we would start and where we did start is January 1st, because that's when the contract was supposed to begin. When it comes to reopeners, it's not starting a fresh contract. We are stating when the new version of the contract goes into effect. We're arguing that. So we're not arguing.
I got that.
Yeah. And to get back to why I originally mentioned that, I mean, I think we both have a better understanding of our different dates here, but and I can maybe see where we had that miscommunication and why this was a concession for us. But this is a concession for us, is going from January 1st to October 1st. That is 10 months of salary that we believe that GAs deserve. We know GAs deserve. That we essentially have to say, well, because we have been delayed, we're willing to go to October 1st. We're willing to give the University of Florida effectively a year of not having to pay those higher stipends, but for the next years, we want to make sure that they are paid appropriately and they have given their raises that match that. And so that is a concession for us. That is something that we're going to continue to say is a concession from us. And when it comes to our minimum stipends itself, you'll see that we have lowered what we've asked for. We're down to 28,000 for a 9-month employee and 37,334 for a 12-month employee. That is, another $1,300 from the 9-month employee that we've lowered. We're still above that J1 stipend, which I think I've made it clear, and I'll make it clear again, is a huge line for us. And we want to make sure that our GAs can be able to we want them to be able to afford to live here. We're below that number already, but we also want them to be able to, per the University of Florida's rules, be able to afford to be here. So we have lowered that by, we think, a reasonable amount. And, we saw that you had raised, in your version where you raised the minimum stipend the most, you had raised it by 1,100 over your last proposal, and we're lowering it by 1,300 on our side. So we think that is an equivalent kind of discussion. We've kept in this language for 10.2. We think that keeping things set to the J1 visa is acceptable. We think it's necessary to make sure that international students know they can be able to afford here. And we honestly, frankly, think that this is something the University of Florida can sell to make sure that they get the best international students. At a minimum, you will be able to afford to be here based off our own requirements. You don't have to worry about finding funding from family or taking out loans. Because we've got your back, we know we got you covered, and we can get the best people involved here. When you lower that barrier and you say, if you're an international student, you're paid less for the maximum you can work than is required by the University of Florida. I think you limit the potential people that are interested in the University of Florida, and I think this helps both of us to raise that number. And then for the merit raises. I think we've made clear time and time again that the minimum stipend is, what we are designed about. We gave in and added merit raises last time we did this, with a lot of discussion on what it looks like. And, I'm happy that we haven't had a discussion on these 1, 2, 3, and 4, these subtexts. But I think we're still pretty far away from that. So we have lowered those by a couple $100 on each front as well, to show that we're willing to make that progress and have that discussion on what that looks like, even if we're still far apart on what our end goal could be, or our happy medium. I kind of ran through that end there. I know we're running low on time, so I just want to make sure we got through it and have that discussion. If you have anything you want to ask here, I want to try to give us a couple of minutes so I could make sure we got those good.
No, I appreciate that. Please, I'm sure you're going to email it to me, but if you wouldn't mind, please do if you haven't done that yet. I mean, the only point that I have, Austin, I appreciate the conversation. It's a good discussion. Is I do want to say, and I don't know if it was, I'm not sure how it was calculated, but just very briefly back to the October 1 versus January 1 thing. We wouldn't calculate that as anywhere near a $50 million concession. I don't know if that was a misspeak or whatever. I mean, there's no way that is a $50 million concession. I think that's what I heard you say. If I'm wrong, I apologize.
That's exactly what I said, and maybe we have a very difference of like how we view that calculation. But in our terms, and I will outline it as simple as I can here. Our previous proposal, our first proposal for January 1st, we had equated the cost at around $50 to $60 million. Obviously, there's some wiggle room in what the actual values are. I'm using slightly outdated unit list data, but it should be equivalent for the most part. But there's some range there.
Okay. No, I got it. I understand. I appreciate it. I understand. You were talking not in terms of last year's agreement. You're talking about in the current proposal year.
Yes. So
okay.
We are saying,
I appreciate that.
The last one was 50 to 60. This is, you're saving 10 months of paying that higher stipend, and we've lowered the stipend ask. So
I got it. I appreciate that now. Yeah.
So over
that was my misunderstanding.
It would be a less of $50 million. So
gotcha. I know we've got just a few minutes. Any other questions other members of the bot team before we sign off? I know I only have about a minute and a half left. All right. All right. Thank you. We are back next Monday. Yes, Austin, that's the plan. And we will have a
Yes.
room at the Rights. Yes.
Yes, and I believe
Okay.
I sent your team the full, or I sent you the full schedule with dates and
Yep.
times. The only difference would be one of those dates is on Thanksgiving, and we didn't check it before we did it. So obviously we wouldn't be able to meet on Thanksgiving, but or the Thanksgiving week.
Gotcha.
So,
Fair enough.
so,
Yeah, I'll
I
keep
can
that in
email
mind.
and verify that date, but it's just a date we wouldn't be able to do
Sure.
anyways.
No problem.
Yeah, and
Um,
yeah, I mean, we're out of time, but I would love to, hear from you guys on Article 7 and Article 10. We're going to try to get Article 4 ready for you guys next week. I think we should also start next week by having a discussion on what articles each team has. I've done this stuff here. I would love to spend 10 minutes, but we're out of time. But
Okay.
just making sure, I think we should start with that and just making sure we're all on the same page and on where we're each
Sure.
at. I think
All
that'd
right,
be
we
good.
can do that.
Okay. Thank you guys
Thank
for
you.
your time.
All right. Bot team, if you can hang out in caucus for just a minute, that'd be great.